Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Well, I was without internet for a few days, and so to avoid potential desync issues with current projects, an impromptu offline game jam seemed like a good idea. So to start, a few variables, an array, and a couple of DS lists would make up our player's arsenal. This included a slowdown effect. Onto the functions, the first is simply a shorthand way to create objects, which needed to be spawned on a specific room layer. The next two functions cover the activation and deactivation of our bullets, which are pulled. Up next are two constructors. The first creates an egg with a random move speed and hatch time. The second constructor is for a player ally, and so it features variables for move speed, damage, and various other features that one can expect from an ally/minion unit. The next function updates minion angles. Now this will make sense later, but it basically updates all minions' positions to provide equal spacing between units. The next two functions are shorthands to add minions and eggs to their respective lists. And the final function is the ticker, which as usual takes care of all of our timing-based behaviors. The first are the minion/player allies, which follow the player and orbit around their position. Their attack cooldown timer also advances, allowing the minions to periodically attack based on the value generated on their creation, all of which is advanced via a global speed variable, thus allowing us to utilize a slowdown effect later. Next in the ticker are the eggs. They follow behind the player similar to Yoshi's Story and also advance their incubation period. Once an egg is ready to hatch, a minion is created using our shorthand function, and the egg is removed from the egg list, all of which again is based on the global timer. Next is the player behavior. If the player's position does not match the destination coordinates stored in the controller, the player then moves towards that point, and once close enough, their position is snapped into place. And finally, an emitter runs, randomly spawning eggs or enemies on the battlefield. A couple variables are set, the bullet pool is created, and some effects layers are hidden for later. On to the step code, right-clicking will toggle the slow mode mentioned earlier, and while slow mode is active, the left click will set the player's destination coordinates, assuming they have stamina of course, which is completely drained on a successful jump to avoid spam. Minions and eggs are then drawn to the screen, and that's it for the controller, so let's move on to the player. First up is the hurt function the player goes through anytime they take damage, which is pretty run-of-the-mill, along with other typical variables for health, stamina, and hurt states. Speaking of the hurt state, in the step event, the player's hurt state would activate a couple effect layers for a few frames to add impact to the damage event. Next, if the player is stationary and comes in contact with an enemy, they will take damage. However, if the player is currently moving, aka jumping to their destination, it is the enemy who will take damage instead, and stamina is regained at 5 points per frame, based on the global speed variable. And finally, when in movement, the player generates a green trail, which is drawn to an effect surface. Enemy units are pretty typical in behavior, slowly moving towards the player's position, taking damage from minion projectiles and the player, all of which are tied to the global timer speed. Bullet projectiles are also typical as they move in the direction given until off screen, or they collide with an enemy, to which they are then deactivated and then added back to the pool. The end result is this weird idea of the player controlling a frog that can only move by jumping. Jumping takes stamina, which has to recharge over time. Now, while deciding where to jump, time slows down, similar to games like Fallout 4 during the VAT state. The minions the player can procure via egg pickup simply help with crowd control, since the jump attack is quite linear. And of course, the visuals here are out there. Using a mixture of game makers provided effects, the goal was to create a water-like chromatic haze. A very odd mixture of like organic and digital, with the view blurring and pixelating when the player takes damage. To be honest, there was no real end goal here other than to make something and try something new. To be honest, while it needs work, I'm actually really digging the concept, so expect a return to this project in the future. But for now, this brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary. So if you enjoyed today's entry, consider leaving a like. Be sure to also subscribe and hit that bell if you haven't already, and let me know what you think of the concept so far. Are the effects overkill? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.